because I've always wanted to do this. I've been a fan of beer since before I was legally able to drink.
So I have the lovely David Davidson of Revocation with me here today. How are you, my friend?
I'm doing good, man. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, man. I'm trying to think of the last time that we saw each other. Must have been what, like through 3 years ago, maybe?
Something like that. Yeah, we were I forget where we were playing. Was it Underworld in London or
Yeah, I think so. You guys,
yeah.
you headlined it, right? I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
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 Oh, yeah, man. Well, that was in the time before BC,
Yeah.
before
The
COVID.
before times.
Whilst everyone else was, ordering extra takeaways and stuff like that during the pandemic, you were busy becoming producer extraordinaire. So what made you kind of think, all right, I'm gonna give it a shot at being a producer?
Um I think well, like during the pandemic, like you mentioned, I kind of dove into my work. I think I did that to try to stay sane. I wanted to try to be like as productive as possible and just kind of like focus on things to kind of keep my mind off of, not being able to tour and all this shit. So I figured, all right, like, let me kind of work on things that maybe I've been putting off or have always wanted to do. So, I launched my website. I studied a lot about recording and like audio and video recording. Like I got like cameras and lights and all that stuff so I can sort of film content from home, because like I was used to going in and being interviewed and like on location, and obviously you can't do that during the pandemic. So I learned a lot, and then I figured, all right, well, I did some guest spots. I collaborated with different people for the Slay at Home things, and as well as the 2 minutes to late night thing that I did, which all which all involved me like recording from home. So I'm like, all right, well, I might as well like really kind of put myself to the test here and see how good my recording chops have gotten, and take on the full record. I didn't do the drums. We did the drums with Shane Frisbee at Brick Hit House, which was where we did the last record. So that was thankfully out of my hands. I don't have the mics nor the know-how to mic up a full, or the room space to mic up a full drum kit. But yeah, I engineered all of Brett's bass parts. I tracked all my guitar parts, or recorded all my guitar parts in Logic, and recorded all my vocals as well. So it was my first time, yeah, taking on a project that big, and it was like a lot of firsts. It was my first time like tracking somebody else, like doing bass with Brett, and then also my first time like tracking myself doing vocals. And there's obviously, you know, a whole bunch of shit that can and did go wrong in the process of recording all that stuff. So it could have gone smoother had I had several recordings under my belt. But I think it's one of those things where it's like a trial by fire, where you don't really learn until you do it and you make those mistakes. But it was tough because you'd be in the recording mindset, and then some fucking ghost in the machine situation would come up where I have to like troubleshoot something, and rather than just saying, oh, I've dealt with this 100 times, like I know how to fix it, it was like just stop me dead in my tracks. Like I had to phone a friend, or look up a YouTube tutorial,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
or just bash my head against the wall until like the computer worked again. So it was a challenge, but to me, even though it might have been frustrating at times, like I came out of it with like a totally new skill, and I was like super stoked to like say like, oh wow, like I really learned something from this process. And now, like, moving forward, like I don't think I'm gonna really, unless we have some like crazy budget, or if I'm recording for somebody else and they want me to like come into the studio like on their dime and on their setup, I don't think I'm gonna be recording like with anybody else ever again. Like I'm gonna have other people mix and master our records, of course, but as far as like the tracking goes, I think now that I've kind of gotten the hard work, put all those hours into this one, it's like you want to use it so you don't lose it, kind of thing, right? So I look forward to like future recordings, and just kind of getting better, and making the process smoother.
Yeah, for sure, man. But was it kind of difficult? Because obviously, like having a producer, they've kind of got different input and things like that. Was it kind of difficult to be like almost like a two people in one kind of thing, and you're like, oh well, I don't have any outside input whatsoever, or how did that work?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's maybe good to have like an extra set of ears on stuff, especially just with certain things like knowing when to like move on from a part because like I'll do the same take like over and over again, like especially if I'm kind of chasing some type of like tone that I have like in my head, like oh I hit that bend, but I wanted it to have like a little harmonic on it or some kind of you know extra sauce that's like hard to kind of quantify and sometimes like yeah having like a impartial third party there to be like no that's the take dude like we should
Yeah.
move on is good because I mean I look at like a record like I mean that's like sort of like a time capsule for like my career, you know what I mean, and it's something that's gonna outlive myself and it's just gonna be out there like for people to enjoy or hate on for all of eternity. So I want to make sure that it's that I'm that I've signed off on every single element of it. You know what I mean? I want to be like I want to walk away from a project and be like okay, like I'm proud of what I did here, and I can kind of put the guitar down and walk away and say like okay, this is like a complete statement, whether it's the solo or like this full song or but it's definitely challenging because we definitely always try to push ourselves with every record. We're not like resting on our laurels. We're very much like okay, how do we take what we did on the outer ones and expand upon that or push it in a different direction and maintain that intensity and that brutality but even push it up a notch. Like I said, like it's not done until it's done, right? And and when and then like that last take that you pushed yourself to do, when you finally nail it, you're like, hell yeah, that's exactly what I wanted, right then and there. The nice thing about doing it myself was, I didn't feel like I was on the clock or had someone kind of looking over my shoulder or like pushing me to like say, okay, let's move on. We're on a timeline here because
Yeah.
like the timeline was what I made it. I could start recording at 9 in the morning if I wanted to, rather than wait for someone to like, some people don't get started until later in the day.
Yeah.
Other people like, they go all night. For me, it's like I have a specific window of when I feel like I'm my most creative and when I'm have my wits about me the most. So I'm kind of on my own timeline there. And I was also, I think, able to kind of like experiment more so than on any recording. Of course, the songs were primarily written and fleshed out, but not having, kind of left to my own devices, like especially on certain parts, I was like, oh, let me throw a harmony on this part and just like see how it sounds. And then I would just kind of go down the rabbit hole. It might be like 2 hours later, and I've tried like every single possible combination of harmonies under the sun. And then I'm like, well, let me just start blending them, and then but I think that's how I achieved some cool results on this new record. Even with the solos, normally again, you're going into the studio. Time is money. You got to have as much of it fleshed out as possible. I kind of approach this one more like a studio musician, I guess, where you just kind of show up and start like recording and like what comes out, which was a fun challenge. So yeah, like I like kind of like pre-prod slash recorded the solos kind of like in real time, like in the studio, rather than like write them a month or two in advance. And maybe there's like 5% that I kind of change up here and there when I'm recording in the studio. This was like I had nothing and then like was just in this studio like demoing shit out and trying shit out, and then within like a week I had the solos for the entire record system.
Did you ever kind of have like, I guess it reminds me of like a Keith Richards moment, like we wake up at like 3 o'clock in the morning and you're like, oh yeah, I can go and track this riff now, or like anything like that.
Um, there was those kind of things I think with some of the lyrics maybe.
Okay.
Even with the album title, I mean, I was kind of going back on so many different things. Like I had all these ideas in my head, obviously, like, I had the concept of like, okay, I'm gonna do like a hell themed record, and I had song titles, and then once the song title comes and the music's there, the lyrics just kind of start flowing out. But I would go on like morning walks or even take breaks from the recording process. Um, and just to kind of get out of the house, but my brain was kind of always going, so I would kind of leave the studio, the tracking uh environment, and then I would be like in like lyric writing mode. But yeah, I remember like really trying to come up with like the right title for the record. Especially since themes of religion and hell, and they've been discussed before in the death metal genre. So how do you do something new with it? How do you bring a creative spin to it? So I was thinking about this idea of like, okay, like hell is kind of like like an inverted heaven or something, right? So I was thinking about, okay, like inverted heaven, and that's cool, but it doesn't quite flow off the tongue as much. And then I started thinking about like you know you know not Christian ideas of hell, but like like Greek mythology, then like Hades, the underworld, the netherworld.
Oh
So
yeah.
I'm like, okay, netherworld is cool, but I'm like, I'm sure there's like a million bands that have called their record netherworld or underworld or something like that. um and then I just like that Keith Richards moment, I guess. I just kind of woke up one morning. I just like Netherheaven just kind of just popped into my head. I think because I was kind of, thinking about so many different titles all at once, that just my brain, just in my REM sleep, whatever, just kind of like smashed a couple words together. And I'm like, oh, that actually is like really cool. It kind of like did what I wanted with the inverted heaven idea, but it just kind of flowed off the tongue more. I don't know. It was like pleasing to say, I guess, like Nether Heaven, the way it flowed. And I think I initially thought of it as two words, and like, combining it into like making, a new word up, that felt like even more special to me, where, because sometimes it's, obviously it's cool to long album titles, or, sort of
Yeah.
have something that's like a sentence or something like that, but like sort of creating a word out of nothingness, that I think has a lot of symbolism. Even the interviews I've done so far, I mean, depending on who I talk to, I feel like different people get different sort of imagery
Mm.
from that title, and that's exactly what I was intending. And I think that it's the making of a a compelling title, when it can sort of mean different things to different people. I mean, even in the artwork itself that Paulo did, it's hellish, and there's these kind of brick reds and like
Mhm.
meaty kind of fiery kind of oranges like in the background, and like this like meaty red of like the demon melee in the front. But if you look like way in the back, there's these little, like a baby blue, like clear blue sky, like way far in the background. And I would sort of describe that color as like almost like a heavenly looking blue. And it's just a little faint hint of that, and then like the rest of the artwork is just like a nightmare. So
Oh, definitely. I think it's a perfect distillation of like everything that the record sounds like, what it looks like, and I especially I picked up on the blue thing because on the one of the vinyl variants is like white with blue splatter, and I was like, oh, that's where it is in the artwork.
yeah, yeah,
It's
it was
so
actually fun choosing the vinyl colors for that reason, because yeah, like when we were doing like I had to pick out the different colors or whatever. And yeah, obviously I wanted those hellish fiery
yeah.
vinyl variants, but I'm like, but there is that like heavenly blue there, and I think it would be so cool, when, and I've gotten one of the vinyls now. I actually have the Elysium variant, the test pressing, which is like this really cool, like, yeah, like baby blue. And it's just cool, like, it's this, yeah, like fiery album cover, and then you pull out this like clear blue sky like vinyl. And then it has like the Nether Heaven, like the red artwork, in the center.
It reminded me a lot of Hieronymus Bosch and things like that. Also, with all the kind of like, I guess I don't know, for lack of a better word, pandemonium going on.
Mm-hmm. It's funny that you mentioned Bosch, because I gave Bosch as a direct reference to Paulo.
Oh no
And
way!
if you look closely, and I think it's in the right corner of that sort of demon army there. So I had zoomed in on on the classic Hieronymus Bosch painting that everyone's familiar with.
Mhm.
There's a demon. I forget where it is in the Bosch painting, but it's like this weird like fish creature with these like crazy like wings for ears. So I actually zoomed in on that and screenshotted it and sent that to Paula. And I'm like, can you put,
Oh, no
you
way.
know, this creature, because it was initially it was like a another creature which looked, or like maybe just like kind of like a goblin looking kind of thing, and I was like, this looks cool, but I'm like, it would be cool to have like a real like nod to Bosch there and literally pull that character out of that old, you know, bring it from the past and have it in like a modern day metal cover.
Yeah, I mean, what kind of, because I've seen obviously in the sort of, the bio that's supplied with the promo and stuff, it mentions that this is very much more of a death metal focused release. What was it that kind of you felt you wanted to focus on death metal this time?
I mean, I feel like we've been on a sort of death metal centric mindset for quite some time now.
Yeah.
I mean, you could probably trace it all the way back to like Deathless in terms of, I think, you know, the production was getting darker, you know,
Mhm.
maybe the music was getting darker. I think my vocals were getting kind of more brutal and more guttural. So yeah, we've just been on that trajectory. You know, I think it just made sense after the outer ones. You know, we went to outer space. On this one, it's like, okay, well, how do we like get more brutal than that? Let's just fucking go straight to hell.
It's honestly so cool. And like you say, it is literally the antithesis of what you were doing before. But I know you kind of touched on this a little bit earlier on, but conceptually, could you sort of elaborate a little bit more on what Nether Heaven represents? Like, is it kind of like a concept album in terms of the tracks, or are they individual songs?
Yeah, I mean, you know, I think in every song, I like having general kind of concepts, right? Like a general sort of framework to work within. Um, but if something is, you know, maybe slightly outside of that concept, like I'm okay with bringing in a song that maybe like doesn't exactly fit the theme, but I'll try to think of like maybe cool ways that I can kind of wrap my head around it, or like, or sort of connect it in my mind where it makes sense. But I mean, yes, there's definitely like an overarching infernal hellish theme to the record. um you know, everything from, you know, sort of modern day uh situations, like, you know, things that are in the news, like, you know, the satanic temple, you know,
Oh yeah.
clashing with the religious right over you know, freedom of speech issues around putting up like a statue of the Baphomet, let's say. um to kind of more just general like musings on like the occult and seances and summoning, so sort of like maybe bringing a little of that storytelling element from the outer ones like into this, but through that hellish theme. um there's nihilistic violence, you know, sort of loosely inspired by, you know, the events of January 6th, but also sort of the underlying sort of seething hatred in the political discourse in America that kind of led up to that moment, the sort of the growing disdain and division, and the powder keg that sort of eventually exploded, and, you know, is we're still dealing with the fallout from that, you know, politically, um, and but also looking at that sort of moment as, you know, something that has also like occurred throughout history, you know, sort of time and time again, like, you know, it's sort of like a general tribalism that is part of the human psyche that we just can't seem to shake, right? You know, it's turning other, you know, people into others, right? And kind of separating people
Mm.
based on like, okay, I'm part of this, you know, political party, you know, and we sort of disagree, and then those disagreements and those divisions just kind of like, I don't know, like mutate and get more and more you know, virulent sort of. And then like a song like Strange and Eternal, which is you know, it maybe breaks from the hell theme a little bit. That was inspired by the works of Robert Chambers. He wrote a series of short stories that were in a book called the King in Yellow. If you're a
Okay.
fan of True Detective at all, first season, the Yellow King, that's where the director got that idea from, was from the Robert Chambers book, and he put it into his show. I mean, he did his own thing with it, but it was that the concept of the Yellow King comes from Robert Chambers. they're all sort of separate, but there's sort of a common sort of mythos, that or a thread that runs through the the stories, which is the King in Yellow. It's a mythical play basically. So you never actually read the King in Yellow, but it's
Mhm.
referenced throughout the different short stories, and it's a play in two parts.
Okay.
The first act is sort of relatively benign, but if you read the second act, it actually drives you insane. So it kind of like draws you in, and then like
Oh, wow.
something in the second act of the play uh, causes you to lose your mind, and you sort of become obsessed with this notion of the Yellow King. And the Yellow King is, this in this world is sort of very real, sort of omnipotent entity that then sort of like possesses you and takes control over you. So I thought, okay, that's not directly, linked to religious iconography per se or this hellish theme, but the connecting line I guess I was able to see was, with just religious texts in general, right? Like the more fanatical the more literally you take a religious text, the more fanatical can become, to the detriment of society and to yourself.
Yeah. I also, you mentioned about kind of going darker and being more evil and things like that over time with Revocation. I feel like, and I probably got this wrong, but I feel like there's a lot of like augmented sounds on this record and some diminished sounds. Is that right?
Yeah, no, you're definitely right. I don't know, the sound of the sharp five augmented chord just to me has a menacing quality to it.
Hmm.
So when I was writing the music for this, I think I had the idea of the I wanted this to be kind of a hellish concept
Hmm.
album, even if it wasn't like at the forefront of my mind when I was writing stuff. I think when you kind of set an intention and you have kind of like an idea of like, okay, like I've only got like one song or just sort of a collection of riffs, but if you know that's the path that you're going to go down, maybe subconsciously those ideas just start flowing out, and you start writing more nefarious sounding shit. So I can't say for sure where some of that stuff comes from, because I mean a lot of it just comes from my subconscious when I'm writing. I mean, I've written riffs with with an idea in mind, like, oh, I'm gonna write using this scale or something like that. But more often than not, it just kind of comes out of me, and I'm not really thinking about anything. I'm practicing, and then I kind of take a break from something specific that I'm working on technique wise or theory wise, and I just start playing for fun. And it's almost like you get in this sort of trance like state, and then a riff just pops out and you're like, oh shit. And it's either going to catch my ear or it's not, right? So when it does catch my ear and kind of brings me out of that state where like I kind of pay attention to what I'm playing all of a sudden. So I'm paying attention to what I'm playing, but I am and I'm not, right? It's that weird kind of, like I said, it's almost like a weird sort of cathartic thing or like a meditative thing. But yeah, when something like really catches my ear, I'm like, oh shit, I gotta like record this. But I've also been kind of coming back to riffs a lot and sort of reworking them, and it's not like a riff will hit my ear and necessarily it'll just be done. It might be like, okay, I like this idea, this concept, but let me pull this thread a little bit more and let me see the different directions I can take it. And I've certainly been recording sort of multiple drafts of parts too, like where I'll record like a general idea, and then I'll kind of come back to it the next day or maybe a week later or something like that, and I'll add like a different tail end to it, or I'll kind of alter up maybe the beginning or the middle part of it ever so slightly, or maybe it might only be on the second turnaround, or just little things like that, just to kind
Yeah.
of bring out more twists and turns, make it that much more interesting. I think it was I think Francis Bacon said the job of the artist is always to deepen the mystery. I always liked that quote. I thought it was interesting. So I guess as a musician, right? I kind of want to think about that in the same way. Like I want to draw people in, and how do I tell an even more interesting story this time around with my music, even if it's an instrumental song. Like, can I take you on a journey just, with the riffs? Do the riffs conjure up a cool imagery
Hmm.
that they're going to tell their own story? And that's how I think I've always tried to write music. I try to write music that I find interesting and surprising, but I think I've just gotten, hopefully, better at it over the years as I've kind of refined my craft, and as I've learned more and gotten better. Um, yeah.
Yeah, definitely, man. Like, I totally agree with you with like one of the things that I think really characterizes your sound, particularly in lead playing, is you'll be solo in and all this sort of stuff, and then you'll go like way over there, and I'm like, whoa, I wasn't not expecting that at all.
Right.
It's
Yeah.
so cool, man.
Thank you. I've said this in interviews before, but my favorite, I think, or one of my favorite elements of music is the element of surprise. When I listen to like a Marty Friedman solo, like as a
Oh,
kid, he had those. It was super lyrical, and like you could hear he was telling a story. But then, like watching a good movie or reading a good book, he would throw. There would be this curveball. There would be like this surprise twist ending that you never saw coming, and you gotta it's like you gotta stop it and
like
rewind it and listen to it again and be like, what just happened there? And that elicits, I think, such a great emotional response, when you can really sort of surprise someone, especially when it's coupled with like an extra added level of emotion, right? Like, oh, like that was surprising in a really beautiful way, or oh, he that was surprising, but he ended on this really sad note, right? Or oh my god, I'm just surprised by the fucking ferocity of
yeah.
that last line, that searing, blazingly fast thing that whoever did, right, that just knocks your socks off and blows you away. So yeah, I think the element of surprise is, I try to strive for that in my riff writing, my solos, and just my songwriting, I guess, in general.
Definitely, man. Friedman is exactly one of the guitarists that comes like straight to mind, and also a bit of Alex Skolnick, that kind of vibe, like. Oh yeah, I wanted to ask. So I believe that one of the tracks is about the Dante's Inferno,
Mm-hmm.
and I know that obviously there's many different layers of hell, but I was
Right.
wondering what's your personal like favorite layer of hell if you had to choose one.
I think probably the ninth circle. That's sort of the culmination of Dante's journey through the different rings of hell. Again, because I think the surprise there is that it's not a hell of fire. It's a hell of ice. Um, it's Satan is literally sort of, I think he's like waist deep, kind of like encased in this like frozen lake, and his like wings and breath are just like blowing these like subarctic frigid winds that are just sort of freezing and cracking the souls of the underworld that are kind of trapped in this lake. And it's just such a cool uh image, especially when you think of the classic sort of iconography of Satan being this hellish, fiery uh, layer. To have it be the exact opposite, I thought that was super cool and interesting.
Absolutely. So I saw, I think on your Instagram that you are collaborating with like a brewery or something. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, we are doing a revocation beer for the first time ever. I'm very, very excited because I've always wanted to do this. I've been a fan of beer uh, since before I was legally able to drink. But yeah, I'm really stoked that we're able to collaborate with KCBC. Tony there is a fucking rad dude. Um, Total metalhead, so he really gets it. I wouldn't say KCBC are, I guess they certainly have metal imagery. Like you look at their cans, and I mean, they're sort of colorful and almost more like kind of comic book looking as far as like the artwork goes. It's not like brutal death metal by any means, but there was like fucking zombies and like weird like creatures and stuff like that on their cans. So yeah, I think it fits well. Actually, Tom Strom did the artwork for the
No way.
can. I don't know if I can reveal Well, I guess I'll reveal it on your show. So I don't know when this is gonna get posted, but so obviously the record's called Netherheaven. The beer we're doing, I wanted to do like a really crushable, a beer that you could have at a show. So we decided to do a Helles lager. So the beer's called Netherhelles.
Oh, cool.
Yeah, and it's like I said, Tom did the artwork. I've only tried, in its sort of first stage of fermentation, but I really can't wait for people to try this. I think it's just gonna be just fucking delicious, but also like crushable and refreshing.
Yeah.
Perfect for being in a mosh pit at a hot show. You cool down, have like because I love different types of beer. Like I love like a double IPA or a stout, but like you're not going to drink like four stouts at a concert. Tony, super cool dude. We've actually talked about doing this for a while now, and I'm sure running a brewery, fucking life gets in the way there with all the other projects you're doing. But I met him at an art gallery for Behemoth because they brewed a beer for Behemoth. I don't remember the style of beer that it was, but I think it was like kind of higher in ABV too. So like I think he like learned his lesson there in terms of like doing like a band beer that's like super high ABV that people are just like, they're just drinking it super fast and they're like, oh fuck, three in, like I gotta sit down. Yeah, we met at the Behemoth Art Gallery and we just kind of exchanged info. He invited me to the brewery, and he was like, oh yeah, we should collaborate sometime in the future. And then yeah, just life got in the way, and then finally with the record being done, I think I either saw Tony out randomly or I think I just texted him and I was like, hey dude, like the new record's coming out, like let's make it happen. He was like, yeah. So we went over, had a couple beers, talked about all these different ideas, and yes, that settled on the Netherhelles idea.
That's so cool.
And I can't wait to sort of get the fruits of his labor,
Yeah.
imbibe
Yeah.
those. But I'll probably have to save like a untouched like 6-pack or something like that just to have on having the Hall of Fame or whatever.
On the
Old
mantelpiece.
man, maybe I'll crack the 50-year-old Netherhelles.
It'll be like one of those things, like after nuclear warfare and everything, the Netherhelles will still be there.
Right.
Previously, you mentioned in kind of our last interview that one of the great things that death metal does is it, despite its horrific subject matter, brings a lot of people together. And of course, a huge purveyor of that was our friend Trevor. And I mean, I haven't listened to the Black Dahlia Murder yet, and I put, obviously when I got the promo through, I put it on shuffle, and I didn't realize that he was a guest on Recrucified, and that was the first experience that I had listening to him after he'd passed, and even now I find it quite difficult to talk about. But one of my fondest memories was when I first met him. We smoked weed out of an apple, and he was just like exactly the Trevor that you would expect, And like from then on, he was just like, "This is our guy on the ground, man. He's the fucking coolest." So I was just wondering if you're happy to share, what are some of your fondest memories with Trevor? Because I know you guys were good friends.
Yeah. Man, there's so many. Yeah, I remember back when like I think it was like Scion was doing like these shows. Like Scion was like this like kind of offshoot Toyota car company, but whoever was working there was like a huge metalhead, and they did like different EPs for bands, but they also did like some like curated like shows. So I think we did like a show with Dahlia in like I think it was like Atlanta, and then like we like flew to like LA and did a show with them there, and it was just right off the bat, he was just like a cool guy. Like we're just like hanging out, like just I remember him like even way back then. Like my first impressions was like, oh man, this guy's just like fucking fun to like hang around with, And then we did like a European tour, and like they were just so great, like such like a gracious sort of host. When you think of a headlining band, like taking support band out, like super cool to us, like tons of laughs. Like obviously, like Trevor was just like this encyclopedia of metal and had such a um just such a love for the genre, and also like giving like different like obscure bands like shout outs like constantly. I mean my project Gargoyle, I remember playing it for Trevor, and like he just kind of like got it right away. He's like, oh, this reminds me of like Virus mixed with like Alice in Chains. It's just like, he just got shit, and he was one of like, I think one of our most sort of vocal, uh, people in the underground, like helping to kind of promote the Gargoyle record, which was super sweet of him. Giving us, I think gave us like a shout out on some like kind of podcast similar to this.
Yeah, man.
But like, yeah, I mean, just like some of my fondest memories were us just like hanging out randomly, like, we'd be in New York at a bar, just like shooting the shit, just like goofing around, like making each other laugh, like coming up with like random band names or whatever, and he had a great birthday party out like on the waterfront in New York, and it was like a small little get together, but it was like a beautiful day out. It was like we were all chilling on this grassy hill, and like the sun was shining. It was just like good vibes all around.
Yeah.
And that's how I love to remember Trevor, just laughing. He always wanted to make you laugh. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
He was
man.
one of those guys where he just put a fucking smile on your face and always made you feel comfortable. So I miss him terribly. Um, he'll never be forgotten. His music and his legacy will live on
Yeah, man.
forever. And it's a damn tragedy that he's gone.
And he's just been the loveliest dude. And he even sent me like, the gargoyle stuff on Bandcamp when he was just like, dude, my friend Dave is, like
Right, right. He was such a fan. Sometimes
yeah,
you get
man.
like you reach a certain level, in the music biz, or I think anything, any kind of offshoot of art, and sometimes people can get jaded or whatever, or they're just so used to like hearing metal, being on tour. It's like the fucking last thing they want to listen to when they get home. And he did have a diverse taste in music, but yeah, he was just such a fucking fan of the underground, and really a champion of the underground, I would say. Um, he'd be promoting some random slam band from the other side of the world that like no one's ever heard of, and he would be like, this is the sickest shit ever, you gotta check this out. So I always love that about him, where he had um that same enthusiasm that I feel like we all have, like when we were like kids, when we were
Yeah, man.
first getting into metal and like going down that rabbit hole and discovering shit for the first time, and feeling that, like, because nostalgia, I think, is the most powerful emotion, right? We're always trying to get back to that that feeling of we were when we were kids, when we were hearing what Morbid Angel for the first time or whatever, when like
Yeah.
metal was like truly new and surprising and frightening or whatever, right? It kind of shocked you as a kid, and I feel like he never lost that. He never lost that enthusiasm.
Yeah, man.
um I love that so much, that he always was hungry for more.
It's amazing. Thank you so much for taking the time to have a chat, dude. I understand you're a very busy man, and soon to be a producer with many demanding clients. So yeah, I just wanted to say thank you so much for coming onto the channel and all that sort of stuff, man.
My pleasure. Thank you so much for having me. Really glad you enjoyed the record, and hopefully we'll see you over in the UK when we come over on tour in the wintertime.